How a Soldier Defied Trump to Save Veterans, the Untold Conspiracy of Area 51. Imagine a letter so daring, it could topple empires, or save a generation. Captain Clara West, a soldier haunted by the ghosts of her comrades, pens a desperate plea to the most unpredictable man alive, President Donald Trump. But when their secret meeting ignites a chain reaction of betrayal, revenge, and a shadowy conspiracy called Project Lazarus, Clara finds herself trapped in a game where the stakes are lives, not politics. Will her fight for veterans' rights expose a truth too dangerous to handle, or redeem a broken system? Subscribe now to uncover every explosive twist in this high-stakes thriller. Because some secrets won't stay buried for long. The sun hung low over the barren expanse of Fort Liberty, Nevada, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of the military base. Captain Clara West, a wiry yet determined figure in her mid-20s, stood at the edge of the training grounds, her eyes scanning the horizon where the desert met the sky. Her olive-green uniform was streaked with dust, and her boots bore the marks of countless patrols. She had spent nearly a decade serving her country, but today, she felt the weight of every sacrifice more acutely than ever before. Clara's mind wandered back to the faces of her comrades, those who had returned home broken, both physically and mentally, and those who hadn't returned at all. She thought of Private Daniel Hayes, who had taken his own life just 6 months earlier after struggling with PTSD. His last words to her echoed in her mind, "Captain, I don't know how to live anymore." It was a plea she couldn't answer then, but one that now burned inside her like an ember refusing to die. That evening, as the base grew quiet and the stars began to pierce the darkening sky, Clara sat alone in her quarters. A single desk lamp illuminated the room, its pale light falling on a blank sheet of paper. For weeks, she had debated whether to write the letter. It wasn't just any letter. It was addressed directly to President Donald Trump, bypassing all official channels. She knew the risks: insubordination, ridicule, or worse, being labeled a traitor. But something inside her whispered that this was the only way to make her voice heard. Her pen hovered above the page for a moment before she began to write. Dear Mr. President, I write to you not as a soldier seeking favor, but as a citizen demanding change. Our military is strong, but it is also broken. We train soldiers to fight wars, yet we fail them when they return home. We arm them with weapons, but we leave their minds and hearts defenseless. The time has come for a revolution. Not in weaponry, but in compassion. Every day, men and women sacrifice their youth, their health, and sometimes their lives for this nation. Yet what do they receive in return? Empty promises, inadequate health care, and a system that treats them as expendable. I have seen too many comrades fall victim to despair, addiction, and suicide. This cannot continue. You are a man who prides himself on breaking norms and challenging the status quo. If there is anyone who can ignite real change within our military, it is you. Please, sir, listen to the cries of those who serve under your command. They deserve better. Clara signed the letter with trembling hands, folding it carefully and slipping it into an envelope. She hesitated for a moment, then scribbled the address of the White House on the front. But instead of sending it through official military channels, she entrusted it to someone she knew she could rely on. A former comrade of her late father's named Agent Marcus Hale. Marcus, now a trusted member of the Secret Service, owed Clara's family a debt from their days together during Operation Desert Storm. He promised to deliver the letter personally, ensuring it would land directly on the president's desk. As Clara watched Marcus drive away, she felt a mix of fear and hope swirling in her chest. Fear because she had no idea how Trump or the military brass would react. Hope because, for the first time in years, she had taken a stand. Little did she know, this single act of defiance would set off a chain reaction that would alter the course of her life, and perhaps the lives of thousands of others. The dusty roads of Shadow Creek, Texas, seemed to stretch endlessly under the pale light of a waning moon. Clara drove through the desolate town, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she tried to steady her nerves. She had received an encrypted message from Marcus Hale the previous day, instructing her to meet President Trump at the Lone Star, a local bar on the outskirts of town. It was an unusual location for a meeting with the leader of the free world, but Clara knew by now that Donald Trump was anything but conventional. As she parked her car and stepped out into the cool night air, Clara couldn't help but notice the eerie stillness of the place. Shadow Creek felt like a ghost town, its buildings weathered and abandoned, save for the faint glow emanating from the Lone Star. Pushing open the creaky wooden door, she entered the dimly lit bar. The scent of aged whiskey and cigarette smoke filled the air, mingling with the low hum of country music playing in the background. At first glance, Clara almost didn't recognize the man sitting at the far end of the bar. Gone was the tailored suit and tie. Instead, Trump wore a black leather biker jacket, his hair slightly disheveled. He nursed a glass of bourbon, his sharp eyes scanning the room with a mix of curiosity and detachment. When he noticed Clara approaching, he gestured for her to sit beside him. "So you're the one who wrote that letter," Trump said without preamble, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "Not many people have the guts to call me out like that." Clara hesitated for a moment before responding. "Sir, I wasn't calling you out. I was asking for your help. Our soldiers deserve better than what they're getting." Trump leaned back in his chair, studying her intently. "You think I don't know that? Let me tell you something, Captain West. Back in 1984, I sued the Pentagon because they wanted to take land from ordinary citizens to build a military base. Everyone called me crazy then too. But sometimes you've got to break the rules to get things done." His words caught Clara off guard. She had expected arrogance, perhaps even defensiveness, but not this raw honesty. For the first time, she saw a glimpse of the man behind the headlines. A man who thrived on disruption, yet seemed genuinely invested in leaving a legacy. Their conversation continued late into the night, delving into topics ranging from mental health support for veterans to the inefficiencies of the current military system. Clara found herself opening up more than she intended, sharing stories of comrades lost to PTSD and addiction. Trump listened intently, occasionally interjecting with questions or anecdotes from his own experiences. But unbeknownst to both of them, they were being watched. Behind the counter, a young woman with piercing green eyes moved silently as she refilled drinks and wiped down tables. Her name was Lena Carter, though few people knew her real identity. To most patrons of the Lone Star, she was just another waitress trying to make ends meet. In truth, Lena harbored a deep resentment toward the military, a resentment born from tragedy. Years earlier, Lena's father, James Carter, had served as a high-ranking officer in the Army. When Lena was just 18, she had been raped by a senior officer during a military gala. Too ashamed to report the incident, she spiraled into depression, eventually attempting suicide. Though she survived, the scars remained, both physical and emotional. Her father, racked with guilt over failing to protect her, had withdrawn from public life, retreating into a shell of bitterness and regret. Now Lena saw an opportunity for revenge. As Clara and Trump spoke, she discreetly activated a recording device hidden in her apron pocket. Every word exchanged between the two was captured, stored, and later sold to a network of investigative journalists hungry for scandal. By the time Clara left the Lone Star that night, she felt a renewed sense of hope. Trump had promised to look into her concerns, even hinting at potential reforms. What she didn't realize was that their private conversation would soon become public knowledge, thrusting her into the center of a media firestorm. The sun blazed mercilessly over Fort Liberty as Clara returned from her meeting with President Trump. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, hopeful yet wary, determined yet uncertain. She had seen a side of Trump that few others had witnessed, a man unafraid to challenge norms, even if it meant risking his reputation. But now, back at the base, Clara faced a new challenge, rallying support for her proposed mental health initiative among the ranks. Her strongest ally was Lieutenant Colonel James Carter, a grizzled veteran who had served 3 decades in the Army. Known for his no-nonsense demeanor and unwavering dedication to his troops, James had always been a guiding figure for Clara. He had listened intently when she first pitched her idea, a comprehensive program aimed at addressing PTSD, depression, and substance abuse among soldiers, and had promised to back her every step of the way. But things took an unexpected turn during a heated strategy meeting in the command center. Clara had just presented her proposal to reallocate funds earmarked for new fighter jets to finance the mental health initiative. The room fell silent as the officers exchanged uneasy glances. It was James who broke the tension, slamming his fist on the table. "This is madness," he growled, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. We can't afford to weaken our defenses just to coddle broken minds. Clara stared at him, stunned. This wasn't the James Carter she knew. The man who had once shared stories of losing friends to suicide and addiction. Sir, these aren't broken minds, she replied firmly. They're human beings. Soldiers who've given everything for this country. If we don't take care of them, who will? James's face hardened, his eyes betraying a flicker of something Clara couldn't quite place. Guilt? Anger? Pain? You're young, Captain West, he said coldly. You don't understand the bigger picture. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. The meeting ended abruptly, leaving Clara reeling. What had caused James's sudden opposition? She decided to confront him privately later that evening, hoping to uncover the truth behind his change of heart. That night, Clara found James sitting alone in his quarters, staring at a faded photograph on his desk. The room was dimly lit, the air heavy with regret. When she knocked softly and entered, he didn't look up immediately. Instead, he traced the edges of the photo with trembling fingers before finally speaking. I had a daughter once, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. Her name was Lena. Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat. She remembered the waitress from the Lone Star, the woman who had recorded her conversation with Trump. Could it be the same Lena? She was brilliant, beautiful, full of life. James continued, his words laced with sorrow. But the military destroyed her. When she was 18, she was raped by a senior officer at a formal gala. Too ashamed to report it, she spiraled into despair. One night, I found her unconscious in her room after an overdose. She survived, but the damage was done. Eventually, she left home, disappeared into the shadows. Clara listened in silence, her heart aching for the man before her. Sir, why didn't you tell anyone? She asked gently. Because I failed her. James snapped, his voice cracking under the weight of his guilt. I was supposed to protect her and I didn't. Afterward, I buried myself in work, tried to forget. But the pain never went away. And now, he paused, swallowing hard. Now I see your initiative as a threat. Not because it's wrong, but because it reminds me of everything I lost. Of how powerless I truly am. For the first time, Clara understood the depth of James's resistance. His opposition wasn't about policy, it was personal. He feared reopening old wounds, confronting ghosts he had spent years trying to outrun. But there was more to the story. As Clara pressed further, James revealed another devastating truth. Lena hadn't simply left home. She had taken her own life years later, unable to escape the trauma of her past. Her death had shattered James completely, leaving him a shadow of the leader he once was. I'm sorry, Clara, he said finally, his voice hollow. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time for change. But I can't be the one to lead it. Not after what happened to her. The transfer order arrived unexpectedly, delivered by a stern-faced officer who refused to meet Clara's gaze. Within hours, she found herself aboard a military transport plane, bound for an undisclosed location, deep within the Nevada desert. Her destination? Area 51. A place shrouded in myth and secrecy, where even the most seasoned soldiers whispered its name with a mix of awe and trepidation. As the plane descended into the barren expanse, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a routine reassignment. Something about the timing, her meeting with Trump, her push for mental health reform, felt too coincidental. She had been marked, singled out for reasons she couldn't yet comprehend. Upon arrival, Clara was escorted through a labyrinth of underground tunnels, their walls lined with reinforced steel and humming with the faint vibration of machinery. The air was cool and sterile, devoid of any natural light. It wasn't long before she was ushered into a high-security briefing room, where a group of scientists and military officials awaited her. Captain West, one of the scientists began, his tone clipped and formal, you've been brought here because of your unique perspective on soldier welfare. We believe you can provide valuable insight into Project Lazarus. Clara frowned, unfamiliar with the term. Project Lazarus? The scientist nodded, gesturing toward a holographic display that flickered to life in the center of the room. The image depicted a human brain, its neural pathways illuminated in intricate detail. Project Lazarus is an experimental program designed to restore cognitive function in veterans suffering from severe PTSD or traumatic brain injuries. Using advanced artificial intelligence, We aim to rebuild damaged neural networks, effectively giving these soldiers a second chance at life. At first glance, the concept seemed groundbreaking, a beacon of hope for countless wounded warriors. But as Clara delved deeper into the project's files, unease began to creep over her. The data revealed disturbing patterns. Test subjects experiencing memory loss, personality shifts, and in some cases, complete psychological breakdowns. Worse still, the program was funded not by humanitarian efforts, but by private defense contractors seeking to monetize the technology. Her suspicions grew when she discovered a classified memo linking Project Lazarus to Senator Richard Hawthorne, a vocal critic of Trump's administration. The senator had allegedly funneled millions into the project under the guise of national security, all while using it as leverage against the president. If exposed, the scandal could cripple both the military and Trump's presidency. Faced with this revelation, Clara wrestled with her conscience. On one hand, exposing Project Lazarus would bring much-needed attention to the plight of veterans and hold those responsible accountable. On the other hand, doing so might alienate Trump, the very man whose support she needed to enact meaningful change. Her dilemma came to a head during a clandestine phone call with Marcus Hale, who had kept tabs on her since her days at Fort Liberty. "Clara," he said gravely, "if you go public with this, you'll destroy everything Trump has worked for. But if you stay silent, you risk becoming complicit in something far bigger than yourself." The weight of his words pressed heavily on her shoulders. For days, Clara wandered the desolate corridors of Area 51, her mind racing with possibilities. She thought of James Carter, whose guilt had consumed him, Lena, whose pain had driven her to despair, and Trump, whose unconventional methods had sparked a glimmer of hope in her heart. In the end, Clara made a decision, not to choose silence or exposure, but to forge a third path. A third path emerges. Late one night, Clara slipped away from her quarters and accessed the facility's mainframe using credentials stolen from an unsuspecting technician. With the help of Maya, a mysterious hacker introduced to her by Marcus, she uploaded the entirety of Project Lazarus's files onto the dark web, ensuring they would reach journalists, activists, and whistleblowers worldwide. But Clara didn't stop there. She included a personal message, addressed directly to Trump. Mr. President, you once told me that leadership isn't about following rules. It's about breaking them when necessary. I'm trusting you to do what's right. Expose the truth, protect our soldiers, and prove to the world that you're more than just a businessman turned politician. Sincerely, Captain Clara West. By dawn, the documents had gone viral, sparking outrage across the globe. Yet, instead of lashing out at Clara, Trump did the unthinkable. He took full responsibility. Standing before reporters in the Oval Office, he declared, "I inherited a broken system, and I allowed certain projects to continue in the hopes of finding solutions. But no solution is worth sacrificing the lives and dignity of our heroes." Effective immediately, Project Lazarus will be shut down, and its funding redirected to veteran care programs. It was a bold move, one that cemented Trump's reputation as a leader willing to defy expectations. And for Clara, it was proof that sometimes, breaking the rules was the only way to create real change. The wind whipped through the air as Clara stood atop a makeshift stage at Mount Rushmore, her silhouette framed by the colossal stone faces of 4 American presidents. Below her stretched a sea of faces, thousands of veterans, their families and supporters who had gathered to hear her speak. It was a moment she had never imagined possible. Yet here she was, ready to deliver a message that would echo far beyond the cliffs of granite. Behind the scenes, Donald Trump watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. He had flown in unannounced, refusing any formal introduction or acknowledgement. To him, this wasn't about politics, it was about redemption. The weight of Project Lazarus still lingered over his administration, but he knew that today's speech could redefine his legacy. For once, he wasn't seeking headlines. He was seeking absolution. Clara took a deep breath, gripping the edges of the podium as the crowd fell silent. Her voice trembled at first, but soon steadied as she began. Ladies and gentlemen, today we stand beneath the shadows of giants, men who shaped this nation with courage and vision. But let us not forget that even giants are human. They bleed, they falter, and sometimes they fail. Yet what sets them apart is not their perfection. It is their willingness to rise after falling. Our soldiers, the men and women who wear the uniform, are modern-day giants. They fight for ideals larger than themselves, often paying a price no one should have to bear. And yet, when they return home, many find themselves abandoned by the very system they swore to protect. We must ask ourselves, what kind of nation do we want to be? One that builds monuments to honor its heroes, or one that truly honors them by healing their wounds? Leadership isn't about statues, it's about hearts. Hearts that feel pain, hearts that break, and hearts that refuse to give up. Asterisk. Her words resonated deeply, drawing cheers and tears from the audience. But amidst the applause, a single gunshot rang out in the distance. A final act of redemption. Far away from the rally, James Carter sat alone in his cabin, surrounded by photographs of Lena during happier times. In his hand, he held a small revolver, the same weapon he had carried throughout his military career. His mind replayed the events of recent weeks. Clara's determination, Trump's unexpected humility, and most painfully, the memory of his daughter's laughter before it was silenced forever. He had spent decades running from his guilt, burying it beneath layers of duty and discipline. But now, staring into the barrel of the gun, he realized there was only one way to make amends. With trembling hands, he penned a final letter. Asterisk to Clara. You reminded me of what it means to be a soldier, not just to fight but to care. I failed Lena, but perhaps my death can serve as a reminder of the cost of silence. Take care of our brothers and sisters in arms. They deserve better than I gave them. Sincerely, James Carter. Asterisk. As the sun dipped below the horizon, James pulled the trigger, his body slumping forward onto the table. It was an act of despair but also of hope, a desperate attempt to right the wrongs of a lifetime. Trump's moment of truth. Back at Mount Rushmore, news of James's suicide reached Trump shortly after Clara concluded her speech. For a moment he stood frozen, the gravity of the situation pressing down on him. Then, without hesitation, he approached the stage, taking the microphone from Clara. People of America, he began, his voice unusually somber. Today we mourn the loss of a great man, Lieutenant Colonel James Carter. He fought for this country, loved it fiercely, and ultimately gave everything to ensure its future. Let his sacrifice remind us that leadership isn't about power. It's about responsibility. From this day forward, I pledge to prioritize the well-being of our veterans above all else. No more secrets. No more lies. The crowd erupted in applause, but for Trump, the moment felt different. It wasn't about winning votes or securing headlines. It was about honoring the fallen and rebuilding trust. The sun dipped below the horizon as Clara stood on the porch of a rustic farmhouse in Montana, her arms crossed against the evening chill. Behind her stretched acres of fertile land, now home to Aurora Farm, a sanctuary for veterans seeking solace and purpose after their service. It had been 6 months since the events at Mount Rushmore, and Clara's vision was finally becoming a reality. Yet, despite the progress, she couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching her. Unbeknownst to Clara, Maya sat perched on a nearby hilltop, her laptop glowing faintly in the twilight. Over the past few weeks, the enigmatic hacker had taken it upon herself to monitor Clara's every move. Not out of malice, but out of loyalty to her father, Donald Trump. Though Maya had played a pivotal role in exposing Project Lazarus, her motivations ran deeper than mere altruism. She was protecting the man who had unknowingly shaped her life from afar, the man whose DNA coursed through her veins. As Clara turned to head back inside, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was unsigned, containing only a single line. "You've done well, Captain West. But the game isn't over yet." Clara frowned, recognizing the cryptic tone immediately. "Maya?" she muttered under her breath, scanning the darkened landscape for any sign of movement. Moments later, a figure emerged from the shadows, approaching cautiously. Maya stepped into the light, her piercing green eyes locking onto Clara's. For the first time there was no pretense, no mask of indifference or sarcasm. Instead, there was vulnerability. "I thought it was time we talked face to face," Maya said quietly, her voice steady but tinged with unease. "You deserve to know the truth." Clara gestured for her to sit on the porch steps, curiosity outweighing caution. "What truth?" Maya hesitated, then pulled a folded document from her jacket pocket. Handing it to Clara, she explained, This is my birth certificate. And before you ask, yes, Donald Trump is my father. Clara's eyes widened as she scanned the document, her mind racing to process the revelation. But why are you telling me this now? Because I need you to understand why I did what I did, Maya replied, her gaze unwavering. When I hacked into Area 51, it wasn't just to help you expose Lazarus. It was to protect him, to ensure he wouldn't be destroyed by his own mistakes. He may not know about me, but I've spent my entire life watching from the sidelines, waiting for the right moment to step in. Clara leaned back, absorbing the weight of Maya's words. So everything, the files, the leaks, it was all part of your plan? Not entirely, Maya admitted. At first, yes, it was about protecting Dad. But then I saw what you were fighting for, the lives you were trying to save, and I realized I couldn't stand idly by anymore. You reminded me that sometimes, doing the right thing means risking everything. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken truths and shared burdens. Finally, Clara broke the quiet. What happens now? She asked softly. Maya smiled faintly, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Now? We keep moving forward. Together. A legacy written in stars. In the weeks that followed, Clara and Maya formed an unlikely alliance. One built on trust, mutual respect, and a shared determination to create lasting change. With Maya's technical expertise and Clara's leadership, they expanded Aurora Farm into a nationwide initiative, providing resources and support to veterans across America. Meanwhile, Donald Trump continued to fund the project, his $10 million donation serving as both a gesture of goodwill and a tacit acknowledgement of his daughter's involvement. Though he never publicly acknowledged Maya as his child, he sent her a handwritten note. Asterisk to my secret star. You remind me of myself. You see the world differently, and you're not afraid to challenge it. Whatever path you choose, know that I'm proud of you. Love, Dad. Asterisk. For Maya, the letter was more than enough. It validated years of longing and uncertainty, giving her the closure she had always sought. As for Clara, she found peace in knowing that her fight hadn't been in vain. On clear nights, she would climb to the highest point on the farm and gaze up at the stars, remembering the promise she had made to herself, and to those who had sacrificed so much. The road ahead won't be easy, she whispered to the heavens. But as long as we have each other, we'll find our way. And somewhere amidst the constellations, a new chapter began. A story written not in ink, but in the light of distant stars. As Clara gazes at the stars over Aurora Farm, a chilling message arrives. The game isn't over yet. Who's pulling the strings? And what deadly secret lies hidden in Maya's past? Don't miss the next chapter, where loyalty shatters, legacies collide, and one wrong move could ignite a war the world never saw coming. Hit subscribe before the truth hits back.